Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Tucker Carlson Tonight, the show that is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink, none of which you will see tonight. We're going to dive into the first 100 days of the Donald Trump presidency. Perhaps no issue has been as big for him during the campaign and for this country as immigration. Here's a look back at how he says he planned to deal with that issue if elected president.
On day one, we will begin working on an impenetrable, physical, tall, powerful, beautiful southern border wall. 2 million people, criminal aliens. We will begin moving them out day one, as soon as I take office, day one. Homeland Security and the Department of Justice to begin a comprehensive review of these cases in order to develop a list of regions and countries from which immigration must be suspended until proven and effective vetting mechanisms can be put in place. I call it extreme vetting, right? Extreme vetting.
Well, joining us now for the hour, as Larry King used to say, Jessica Tarloff, a Democratic strategist, Charlie Hurt with the Washington Times, the star of the Washington Times, honestly, and Molly Hemingway of The Federalist. It's great to see you all.
Yeah.
I'm just going to start in this order and then jump in. Molly Hemingway, there's no question, I think, just to those of us who watched from afar this campaign unfold, immigration at the center of it. Trump made a lot of pretty specific promises on the subject. Does he have to keep them?
Well, I think that a lot of people said that Donald Trump didn't care a lot about issues during this campaign.
Right.
He actually did care a lot about issues, and immigration was one of those topics that he hit early, and it was a big reason why he got support early on. And there's a big desire for people to work on this issue. Now, is he going to deport 12 million people? I would say no,
right.
But you get a lot of understanding about where he's going with his nomination of Jeff Sessions. There is a lot that can be done simply through enforcing the laws that are on the books.
At DOJ, at Justice Department.
Yes,
yeah.
Jeff Sessions as Attorney General. And Jeff Sessions is a very much a law and order guy. He very much believes that the laws on the books should be enforced, and there's a lot of room for getting a lot done just that way. So I think that that's probably the best indicator of what's going to happen.
Personnel is policy. That's absolutely right. The wall, Charlie, the wall.
Yeah.
I'm one of the rare people who lives here. I didn't mock the wall. I think the wall makes a lot of sense. Are we going to get a wall?
No, and you know, everybody has walls. There are walls everywhere, and there's supposed to be walls, and there are walls. The 2006, I think it was, Fence Act that both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama voted for.
Yeah.
That's essentially, you know, the wall that he was so ridiculed for. And I think that a big reason why Trump was such a surprise here is because he did pick immigration. And immigration is something that both, Democrats have been, for open borders for a long time now. And even Democrats, Republicans had sort of started to become in favor of open borders. They'd been sort of jeered into the corner thinking that, oh my gosh, I'm a racist if I don't support open borders. And so he kind of took both parties by surprise.
Oh,
and then all the people jumped in behind it. To answer your question about whether we get a wall or not, I don't know whether we're going to have a physical Great Wall of China along the southern border with a big, fat, beautiful door. But I think that if he enforces the laws that are currently on the books and deports, people who have committed crimes beyond that, and does something about, controlling, stopping the ongoing flow into the country, I think you do that much, and you are 80% have solved the problem.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of pressure comes off of not only of him in terms of keeping his wall promise, but also in terms of what happens to the remaining illegal aliens who are here otherwise obeying the law.
Right. So once you don't feel overwhelmed, you can make rational decisions.
Yeah.
Jessica, I promise I'm not going to pick on you for the hour. We don't agree on this issue.
Only 57 minutes?
58 in that range.
She can handle.
What's the argument against a wall? I know everyone's like, oh, the wall. But what is the rational, since you're a rational person, what is the argument against a wall?
I actually don't think there is much of an argument against a wall. I think that Democrats always should have had a kind of piecemeal, but in one approach, which is we'll secure the border, whether you're going to do that physically or with border agents. I mean, the Gang of Eight bill had, I think it was 20,000 border agents, which was more than Donald Trump was proposing. I don't think Democrats are actually against this. I think that they get scared, first of all, about keeping Latino votes. right? Which, I mean, this election has kind of upended that block voting rule, so we're going to see where that goes in the future. And I think that they just wanted to oppose Republicans largely.
Right.
So we have a net flow out of Mexican immigrants at this point. I mean, we had 1 million less than we did 2 years ago, I believe it is. And we're going to see where we go with this. But I think Donald Trump can be really smart about this, and he can put more border agents there. I don't know if you're going to be able to build a wall or if you can put in more fencing. But if you put more agents in, and then you also start talking about the fact that you understand that the vast majority of these illegal immigrants who are here are hardworking, genuine people who just want a better life, and talk about a pathway to citizenship. I don't know what language he has to use, but over 60% of Americans favor that. I mean, that's where it's interesting. I mean, the Trump base, build the wall, lock her up, all of that kind of stuff, but the country isn't there, and now he's the president for all Americans.
You could solve this problem like tomorrow if you crack down on employers hiring people who are not here legally, it seems to me. There's a lot of pressure not to do that.
Pressure from both parties.
That's, well, from the Republicans, really, on that question.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is a chamber of commerce.
And what's the only people that don't have a chamber or don't have lobbyists working on their behalf in that whole argument are American workers.
Right, that's totally right, Coach Sheffick. Another area that you could see Trump's impact for decades to come, of course, the Supreme Court. As president, he'll nominate at least one justice, we know that, and perhaps more, perhaps a number more. Here's what he said about Supreme Court appointments throughout his campaign. Watch this.
Perhaps the single most important thing the next president is going to have to do is pick Supreme Court justices.
This will have
The justices that I'm going to appoint will be pro-life. They will have a conservative bent. They will be protecting the Second Amendment. They are great scholars in all cases, and they're people of tremendous respect. They will interpret the Constitution the way the founders wanted it interpreted, and I believe that's very, very important. I don't think we should have justices appointed that decide what they want to hear. It's all about the Constitution and so important, the Constitution the way it was meant to be. And those are the people that I will appoint.
The Constitution, the way it was meant to be. Molly, I do think this specific issue is one of the main reasons that conservatives, evangelicals, voted for Trump. He's not one of them, but they thought, we know exactly what she's going to do. Is he going to make good on their hopes for the Supreme Court?
One of the only times you saw Donald Trump express humility during the campaign was when he talked about evangelical support for him. He understood that people were putting a lot of faith in him and a lot of trust in him, and he's going to reward that loyalty. And he committed to this as recently as last week when he said he was going to nominate a justice from his list of 21 really good conservative justices. So that's definitely going to happen. All of the incentives are aligned to make sure that happens for that first nominee. He also needs to do it for the rest of the nominees that come forth, not just at the Supreme Court level, but every other judicial opening. This could really be his legacy, is returning the court to a more constitutional
I think he will, because
restraint.
he put out the numbers. I will just correct one thing, that there was one other moment where he expressed humility, was my favorite. He was saying, there'll be a lot of attack ads against me. All of them lies. And he paused and goes, well, not all of them lies. Which I loved. But, I mean, is that the list of 21? He's not going to pick, I mean, why wouldn't he pick Ted Cruz? I know he's not on the list, but it kind of takes him out of the political realm, which might be helpful.
I think it would be
good.
I think it would be terrific in a lot of
We'd have
ways.
Ted Cruz forever.
But he wouldn't be in the Senate. And Democrats would be like, they couldn't vote for him fast enough just to get him out of here. He's so terrible.
That's totally true.
But to, along with what Molly was saying, it would kind of be a little frightening, because I don't want him to go anywhere off the list. Just this is one thing that he can't ad lib. This is the one thing he simply can't be left to his own freewheeling. As much as I love when he's freewheeling and off the wall and says crazy stuff, this is the day that Justice Antonin Scalia died was a terrifying moment.
It was
when you think, and even as somebody who liked Donald Trump from the very beginning, it was sort of a terrifying moment, because it was like, okay, he gets everything in the main generally, and he understands that you don't have to be an expert to run this country, in my opinion. But that one, it requires a certain appreciation of some of the finer points that I'm not entirely certain that he gets, which is what is so dang appealing about him. But he can make the argument, go back to the original argument, which is, does the Constitution mean what it says? as Republicans or conservatives believe, or does it just mean whatever you feel like it means? And yeah, because we want to change it, but going through the changes of a constitutional amendment is too much of a hassle. We just want to change it to mean whatever we say it means. That's a great argument. That's a great fight, and conservatives should be able to win that fight. And I could see a guy that as plain spoken as Donald Trump making a great argument for
they'll win it the first time for sure, Jessica, because the first appointment just brings the court back to stasis, to the balance it had for
and we have to pray that RBG lives forever.
That'd be Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, sorry.
Those of us who are not liberal.
You still know who she is. I hope.
But
she's
it's
the
the
little
next
cute
one.
one that
it's
sleeps.
the second appointment if one of the people from the left leaves the court. I mean, that's a real fight. But what do Democrats do? They don't have the majority.
No, there's not a lot that you can do. I mean, you can, pray a little bit about it, find God. Liberals find God about this.
So it really is kind of bringing religion back to the Democratic Party.
We'll see, how the lay of the land looks when this actually comes up. But yeah, I think there's a lot of hope that has to go along with this. That also, the fact that President Obama put up Merrick Garland, who is a more reasonable choice. I mean, he could have gone for an extreme leftist judge. Not that he was going to get through any of this at this point, but he did try to go more centrist. And I believe Hillary Clinton would have as well. That is where she is more naturally anyway. That, there is some truth to the fact that Republicans have said, or at least Donald Trump, that he has an interest in working with Democrats. But I think that you're both right. And I mean, Republicans are in very good position right now in terms of the court. And that is, I believe, what turned a lot of these never-Trumpers into Trumpers for this purpose, because they got scared about a leftist activist court that was going to come about if Hillary Clinton got into office. And the praying.
How grateful are you that Harry Reid has taken the nuclear option, or has put the nuclear option on the table?
So grateful.
So grateful. All right. We'll explore our gratitude in coming segments. Well, Donald Trump hit Obamacare left and right of the campaign trail, of course, but now that he's the president-elect, what will he do with it? The president's signature law. That is next. Stay tuned. Well, for almost the length of the campaign, Obamacare was a key campaign target for Donald Trump. He promised to repeal and replace it repeatedly, but since winning, that plan appears to have been dialed back a little bit. Here to explain is Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy.
The first of the winter holidays is here, and when they're all over, health insurance premiums for many are set to spike, so consumers are curious what the new president will do about it. The one certainty so far seems to be that something will happen quickly.
Decisions have been made that by the president-elect that he wants to focus out of the gate on repealing Obamacare and beginning the process of replacing Obamacare with the kind of free market solutions that he campaigned on.
The vice president-elect's language there is key because he suggests there could be a little bit of a wait between the Affordable Care Act's repeal and something else becoming a law to replace it. Mr. Trump said recently the gap won't be too long.
We're not going to have like a 2-day period, and we're not going to have a 2-year period where there's nothing. It will be repealed and replaced.
Obamacare repeal is the first of 7 steps to improve the healthcare system that Mr. Trump lists on his website. Other bullet points include freeing up insurance companies to compete across state lines, allowing customers to deduct the cost of insurance premiums from their tax returns, and letting more people utilize health savings accounts, something long favored by conservative think tanks. The Republican Congress has voted dozens of times over the last few years to get rid of Obamacare, but they haven't been on the same page as the person in the White House until now. So many experts anticipate Speaker of the House Paul Ryan playing a major part in shaking the next big healthcare law.
We are so eager to get to work with our new president-elect to fix America's pressing problems.
Something Republicans are wary of right now is canceling popular parts of the Affordable Care Act, like covering pre-existing conditions, but that is something the next president says he's okay with keeping in. Tucker?
Oh, the great Peter Doocy live for us. Thank you. Back with us, Jessica Tarloff, Democratic strategist, Charlie Hurt with the jewel of the Washington Times, honestly, and Molly Hemingway, the main reason to read The Federalist. Okay, so the Obamacare thing, obviously the president-elect is acknowledging that no pre-existing conditions, keeping your kids on to, they're 40 or whatever it is, 26. These are really popular, so he's not going to tamper with them. But if you don't tamper with those two provisions, you really still kind of have Obamacare, don't you?
Well, actually, you don't, and most of the plans for replacing Obamacare include those provisions. The thing is, Obamacare is going to die no matter what. I mean, it's going to die under the weight of its own horribly written self, and so something's going to need to happen, and Republicans kind of own this at this point. What will be interesting to see is who President-elect Trump chooses as his lead policy advocate here. Is he going to, or we'll know a little bit more when he names someone for the Health and Human Services, whether that will be the lead policy advocate. Is he going to just defer to Congress? And even there you have differences of opinion. Senator Mitch McConnell has kind of deferred to Bill Cassidy, the senator from Louisiana, who just wants to kind of tinker with Obamacare. The House has much bolder proposals, but even they retain, most of them retain keeping 26-year-olds on their parents' health care plan and making some kind of provision for people with pre-existing conditions. So we still, this is one area where we really don't know what's going to happen, except that we know Obamacare is done.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is. It's totally unsustainable as a math question, unless you were to repeal math, which they may try to do next session.
I would be in favor of that.
I would. As a liberal arts guy, I'm totally in favor of that. No, but if you tell insurers that they can't account for risk, which is basically what you're doing when you say they have to take people with pre-existing conditions, they're no longer really selling insurance. I mean, I'm not saying they're not doing something virtuous. It's a good deed, but it's not really insurance.
Yeah.
So once you accept that, why don't we just wind up a single payer? I mean, aren't we going to?
I mean, this has been the problem from the beginning with Obamacare. Whether Obamacare fails under its own weight, which I'm sure it will, or not, we've sort of crossed the river. I mean, the government is going to be involved in this, and they're going to be paying for people's health care forever. And the politicians will never take, there's such wusses, they will never take away anything, an entitlement that has been given to people. And so, and that was the, and this was, to me, a big argument in favor of Donald Trump, because, we've gone with the constitutional conservatives. We've gone, we could have voted for Ted Cruz, who promised us how many times he was going to repeal Obamacare when Obama was still in office. All of it lies. Those Republicans are the ones that were standing around when we got Obamacare. That was the game right there. So yeah, it may be pared back.
We had the numbers for it. It wasn't. They got it against their will. Enough minutes to get it done.
Exactly.
I mean, we moved quickly. Democrats organize well when we know that we have 10 minutes.
All it cost you was the House, the Senate, the presidency,
but we still have Obamacare.
No, but that's true. That's actually a very deep point.
Hey, now.
More seats lost nationally, not just at the federal level, but exactly.
And he's so popular. We were just talking about this in the green room.
He's the only
Obama is so popular, and the Democratic world is crumbling beneath him. It's so strange.
It is strange. We're going to get to that. Donald Trump prides himself on making deals, negotiations. That's what he does for a living. So when he changes his mind on policy, should you be surprised? Is it part of the art of the deal? That is next. So is it flip-flopping or is it political evolution? That depends upon who you ask. Over the past year and a half, President-elect Trump has changed his mind on some issues. That's not always a bad thing, obviously. It is interesting, though. Fox News chief national correspondent Ed Henry is on that question.
It was a centerpiece of President-elect Donald Trump's historic campaign. A pledge to drain the swamp in Washington while also bringing his opponent, Hillary Clinton, to justice.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
But now Trump's key supporters are concerned the incoming president is backtracking on that promise and others, especially after a meeting at the New York Times where Mr. Trump told their reporters and editors he thinks prosecuting Clinton, quote, would be very, very divisive for the country.
Well, so much for locking her up, I guess. I can understand wanting to put the election behind us and heal the nation. But I do hope that all the things that Donald Trump said about how crooked she was, that we just don't let it go without some serious effort to see if the law was truly violated.
Senator Lindsey Graham, a longtime Trump critic, cited what he called a mess at the Clinton Foundation and other big problems. Though Mr. Trump's campaign manager, Kellyanne Conway, insisted the former Secretary of State has already paid a heavy price.
I think Hillary Clinton still has to face the fact that a majority of Americans don't find her to be honest or trustworthy. But if Donald Trump can help her heal, then perhaps that's a good thing.
The pivot is part of a larger trend for President-elect Trump, backtracking on several key campaign promises. Those concerns seem to be bolstered by a new video released by Mr. Trump, which showcases his plans for the early days of his administration.
My agenda will be based on a simple core principle: putting America first.
The video may be more notable for what it fails to mention, specifically any plans for repealing Obamacare or building a wall on the southern border.
Who's going to pay for the wall?
Mr. Trump's pledge to build a wall, of course, was a defining aspect of his candidacy. But congressional Republicans seem to have other ideas for how to secure that border. Here's what House Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy told Fox when asked about the wall.
When you look at a wall, but you also have the technology today with UAVs, you can look out 40 miles ahead. The terrain is different, so you can't always build in just a specific place.
And while candidate Trump was emphatic about tearing Obamacare to pieces,
Real change begins with immediately repealing and replacing the disaster known as Obamacare.
after lobbying from President Obama to keep as much of the law as possible, Mr. Trump said in his first post-election interview with the Wall Street Journal, he favors keeping at least two key provisions, one that protects individuals with pre-existing conditions and another that allows people to remain on their parents' plans until age 26. But even those changes may prove to be too difficult, with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer declaring it will prove to be too expensive to only keep those popular items.
He won't be able to do it because now even he, after his meeting with President Obama, said, oh, I want to keep the good things. Well, you can't keep the good things without keeping ACA.
In fairness to the president-elect, that video laying out his priorities was about what kind of executive actions he can do quickly. Building the wall and changing Obamacare will need buy-in from Congress and will not happen in the first few weeks anyway. Nonetheless, some of Mr. Trump's early comments still have his supporters wondering exactly how he'll move forward. Tucker?
Ed Henry, ladies and gentlemen, does this show that Mr. Trump is willing to negotiate on positions? Of course it does. The question is, to what extent is he willing? Jessica Tarloff joins us again, along with Charlie Hurt and the great Molly Hemingway. So this ought to be welcome news to you, Jessica Tarloff, part of the loyal opposition to the Trump administration, that he's actually, despite the grotesque and stupid caricatures in the press of him as this right-wing crazy, pretty non-ideological and actually at heart a negotiator.
I think that that's right. I would take issue with the fact that it's just characterizations, because he did say a lot of the things that the press then ran with. Well, like, we're going to ban all the Muslims. He said that. And then the press...
Figure out what's going on here.
Right, and the extreme bet. You know, Donald Trump is no... oratorical saint or whatever.
No. I think he's rhetorically incontinent. I agree with that. But it doesn't mean that he's a right-winger.
No, he's definitely not. I mean, he was one of us, and he's given a lot of money to us. So,
being
Democrats.
Okay.
I mean, over the years. And he talks about it freely, that you do whatever you need to do to get what you want. But I think this infrastructure bill, this $1 trillion infrastructure bill, if we find out that it's actually infrastructure spending and not just tax breaks for people who, developers, is going to be a great thing. I think on criminal justice reform, which no one's talking about, there's great opportunity with Donald Trump, and he can kind of join the likes of Rand Paul and Tim Scott to get things done. He talked about that New Deal for Black America, which I hope will work out, and we'll see enterprise zones popping up all over the country, like Jack Kemp style. There's a lot that we can do together. That's why I'm more concerned about his appointments and Mike Pence than I am about Donald Trump himself, because he's the least ideological of the bunch.
Are you concerned about Mike Pence or heartened by Mike Pence, Charlie?
Probably loves Mike Pence.
No, I didn't think he was a very good pick at the time, but I think he's proved to be an extraordinary vice presidential nominee and an extraordinary partner in terms of he has had a very good effect on Donald Trump, and I admire him immensely. I stand corrected. He was a great pick. But one of the most appealing things about all of this, none of us is going to be 100% happy with what comes out of this administration. There is no doubt about that. And conservatives are right to be worried about a lot of things, I think, starting with Obamacare. But one of the things that I think the greatest things that come out of this election is you actually have for decades we've had both parties working in concert with Congress and the White House. If they both own the same party, they'll just do anything. They'll give away the store. And we now have a divided Republican Party, at least a suspicious Republican Party, where you have Republicans that control Congress and they're suspicious of the Republican president in the White House. That is a fantastic thing. That is exactly the way the founders designed it, and that's what they wanted there to be, that check on the executive branch, and I think that that's a terrific thing.
Huh? Do you buy that, Molly? That's an interesting analysis.
I'm a huge fan of gridlock, and I hope that that's what will happen. I'm a little bit worried, though, that in fact you'll see a lot of deals being made in a way that is going to make conservatives very unhappy. Chuck Schumer is a longtime ally and friend of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has funded his campaigns more than almost anybody else. They have a relationship that goes back. Chuck Schumer's not a stupid guy, and he's going to be working with Donald Trump. He's already been kind of cozying up and being friendly with him, and a lot of other Democrats understand that they need to be friendly with him too. Joe Manchin.
So what matters? What's the point at which conservatives should freak out?
Well, I think they just need to remain committed to their principles, and they need to be open-minded and broad-minded. I actually think there's, it's a danger how much Donald Trump is committed to deal-making, but there's also an opportunity there.
Yes.
We really do finally have a chance to reach across divides, fix immigration problems, work on national security, fix Obamacare. There's a real opportunity here if people are open enough to take it.
No, I think that's totally right. All right, Donald Trump, the dynasty destroyer, and he is one. During the 2016 campaign, Mr. Trump took out two of the most powerful political families in American history. Question is, what is next for the Bushes and the Clintons, still nursing their wounds? Straight ahead, we'll take that up. Stay tuned.
Putin, from everything I see, has no respect for this person.
Well, that's because he'd rather have a puppet as president of the United States.
No puppet.
And it's pretty clear.
You're the puppet.
It's pretty clear.
I didn't want to. Excuse me. 1 second.
No.
I didn't want to.
Donald, you cannot take
more energy tonight. I like that. Look,
I was asked the question.
I didn't want. It was my obligation as a businessman to my family, to my company, to my employees, to get along with all politicians.
So Donald Trump started his career as a builder, but now his most famous project may be in demolition. Almost single-handedly, Trump toppled not one, but two American political dynasties, perhaps the most powerful of the last century, the Bushes and the Clintons, of course. Is this the end for those two political families? Back with us, Jessica Tarloff, Democratic strategist, Charlie Hurt of the Washington Times, Molly Hemingway of the Federalist. Jessica Tarloff, this man, underestimated by everyone, overturned not simply all of Washington, New York, and Los Angeles as well, but the Bushes and the Clintons. I mean, they are gone, unless I'm missing something.
You're not missing something. I actually think the effect on the Clintons is a lot greater than it is on the Bushes. I think that there are people who, because I think that the Clintons had, at this particular moment, kind of further to fall in a certain way. I mean, Bill Clinton is still one of the most overwhelmingly popular figures in, modern American political history, or he was before this. We'll see how the polls look in the next few months. The Clinton Foundation was largely heralded for its great work. Now the narrative is the opposite of that. I saw there was a Daily Caller report about how many fewer donors, I think it was only 5 donors, had come to the Clinton Foundation in the last 3 or 4 months or something, which was well below where it was. And I think that we're talking about that and whether they're actually charitable people, when these are people who committed themselves to public service throughout their lives. I think that's different than the Bushes, who I believe took a principled stand against this non-ideological candidate. And a lot of people felt that way. I mean, they were champions of the Never Trump movement. And I think that Clintons are also flashier than Bushes. They want to be out there. They're more high society types.
That's totally right.
So I think this hurts the Clintons more than it does
I just
hurt
have
the
trouble
Bushes.
believing, Charlie, that considering all the good works it does, ending childhood obesity, ending poverty, ending disease, insect infestations, all the good things that the Clinton Foundation does, that people won't continue to give it money. I mean, it saves lives.
Except that the Clintons are involved. No, I totally agree that the Clintons are finished, and Republicans should be.
And the foundation is over too, right? Because it was only about
she's gonna be making speeches for like $20,000, and she's not gonna do it. I mean, all of the everything went out of the.
She's gonna be speaking to the Rotary at the Red Lobster on Route 29.
But the question about the Bushes, I think, is kind of interesting because I think that they could be finished as well. But if Donald Trump turns his presidency into a disaster with all sorts of questions about back-scratching and all the kinds of things that allowed him to beat the Clintons, then I think that the Bushes could survive that and come back. If he does what he says he wants to do, which is make this administration about big things and overhaul the federal government and do a lot of good for the country, I think that the Bushes could be finished.
So I understood why the Bush people did, not just the Bush family, the constellation of people around them, didn't like Trump. He was rude to them and rude in general, and stylistically they didn't like anything about him. But I never understood what they were for. Like, what was their program in contrast to Trump's program? Like,
right. Well,
open borders, more foreign. Like, I didn't really get what they were for.
I think they were really interested in preserving George W. Bush's legacy.
Right.
And actually, this is why I think that the American people deserve credit for what happened in taking down these two political dynasties. They are the ones who made sure that Jeb Bush was not the Republican nominee. And they're also the ones who made sure that Hillary Clinton is not our next president. And we really need to credit them. This was a renunciation of Bush foreign policy, I think. And this is where we need to be careful about whether the Bushes really are done. There are a couple ways that they could rise up again, and one is that George P. Bush is a very popular office holder in Texas, and he is a rising star.
And he stayed with Trump. I mean,
and he did. So. And the other thing is that you're going to see a lot of Bushies getting back in with this administration, and so I think it's really good to pay particular attention to those foreign policy positions. How many people who adopted that foreign policy will get their way.
Well, right. If the architects of the Iraq War wind up in charge of American foreign policy again, like, what was the point?
Exactly.
Yeah, right now, the establishment is down on the River Nile looking through the reeds for the little basket with George P. Bush in it.
Or Chelsea Clinton.
Or Mitt Romney, who might have to be the Secretary of State.
I know, it is sort of amazing.
So.
We need to tape a Christmas special because we'll have a lot more information on where we wound up. All right, we're going to come back to our fantastic panel in just a minute. The press went under the microscope during the 2016 election. A lot of bias was exposed. Will anything change? That's on the table next. Well, for the past year, it's been pretty hard to ignore the bias in the press because the press weren't hiding it at all. They were reveling in it. The hard part may be doing something about it, fixing it. Will the press do its own post-mortem to identify the problems and fix them? Don't hold your breath for that. Are we in for more of the same, or will something else totally weird happen in the media landscape? Back with us, Jessica Tarloff, Charlie Hurt, and of course, Molly Hemingway. Molly, the self-inflicted wounds that the press inflicted upon itself seem to ensure the rise of alternative media. Because, like, nobody trusts the New York Times or NBC anymore. I know I don't.
Well, the media really did a horrible job this year, and they haven't even come close to coming to terms with what a bad job they did. They've kind of admitted that they read the polls wrong. That was not the problem. The problem was every single way that they covered this campaign, from the beginning to the very end. You know, the way they treated Trump voters, the way they treated Clinton and her voters, just not understanding anything about the dynamics of this race. And they have a chance to recover if they come to terms with how much they failed. They have shown very little indication that they're willing to do that. Earlier this week, Christiane Amanpour accepted an award. Journalists are always giving each other awards, and I don't quite understand that, but accepted an award where she kind of tripled down on all the things that everyone had gotten wrong during this election season. And so it's troublesome, and I'm worried because they need to start reporting facts instead of pushing narratives, and they need to do that by, 20 years ago.
I do think, if I can just call you out on overstatement, I don't think calling Christiane Amanpour a journalist is exactly good. She's a commentator.
But there really need to be systematic changes for our media. And one thing she did get right, Amanpour got right, was that Donald Trump has figured out how to completely bypass the media. And that is good that journalists start to come to terms with how they no longer hold this role as gatekeeper. And it is even more incumbent upon them to restore some credibility and provide some value to the American voter, or else they're going to be completely meaningless.
I think it is. I mean, that is kind of the story. The press has much less power than we imagined they did, and I don't think it's necessarily good. As loathsome and indefensible as they are, don't you want some commonly recognized source of credible information?
Oh, absolutely. But, the alternative, as we saw in this election, is atrocious.
Well, it is.
And as you say, it's not just the alternative media that cropped up in this. By the end of it, Donald Trump had reached like almost this sort of Ronald Reagan stature in terms of being able to go over the press, over the media, and talk directly to people, whether it's with his, his beautiful Twitter account or whatever. He was talking directly to people. And what was so interesting about it is that people would come up with these stories about him, just slandering him And every single one of those things seemed to kind of sheathe them in Teflon, so that the next one just kind of bounced off.
Right. So the more ludicrous the attacks, the more inoculated against future attacks it was. So I think most people in Washington assume that once he actually becomes president, inauguration in January, he'll stop with the tweeting, everything will go right back to normal, have the White House briefing every day, some credible person will be like, I'm the press secretary. I don't believe that necessarily is going to happen.
Oh, I don't think so. I mean, I think that he'll have some adult who checks his tweets before they go out, hopefully, or something of that nature, because I think it's totally unpresidential and unprofessional to be tweeting some of the things that he does. But I think he should maintain his voice. I thought his 100 Days YouTube video was fantastic, because you can't be mad at the media for interfacing with the public if you just talk to them directly. Right. So I think we'll see a lot more of those fireside chats, whether they're 2 minutes long or they get longer than that. And I think that that's smart for him. I don't think that the coverage was as crazy as you guys do from the left on this. I think there were a lot of stories. Like, we had countdown clocks about when was the last time Hillary Clinton gave a press conference, and no one's talking about the fact that Donald Trump just stopped giving them at the end for the last few months. He was just like, I'm done with this, you know. And when you say they made up these ludicrous stories, Donald Trump did a lot of ludicrous things. This isn't made up, all of it. I understand the liberal media wanted to run wild with it, and they wanted to perhaps overblow the alt-right thing, or, you know, David Duke's in love with this guy, so you can't like him. But the number one mistake, and this is on us, on the Democratic Party and liberals, is that we painted all Trump supporters with the xenophobic, homophobic, racist brush. And people lied to pollsters in some cases and said they were voting for Hillary or they were undecided, and broke for Trump. Or
it's
just
still happening, though, with this alt-right stuff. You get some hotel room ballroom filled with lunatics, and all of a sudden they speak for every conservative.
I don't think that's true, but I think that the alt-right is concerning, and I'm not someone who calls them just white supremacists or whatever it is. When Donald Trump says, I disavow the alt-right, and Steve Bannon has openly said, I am the messenger of the alt-right.
Well, it depends what you mean by the alt-right. I mean, if you mean conservatives who are rethinking what it means to be conservative, put me in that category. If you mean some nutcase with a creepy Hitler salute, that's disgusting.
Someone should just take away David Duke's Twitter account. I think that would help a lot of people.
All right, I'm being told that we're taking a commercial. We'll be right back. It was, of course, an amazing, amazing election year, but we are still thankful for a lot that happened and for what may be coming up in this coming year. Our Thanksgiving gratitude next. Well, considering today is Thanksgiving, we figured why not take a little time out of the show to consider what we're most thankful for. Jessica, what are you thankful for?
Going old school, family and friends, good people around me, colleagues. They've all been fantastic. And I want to thank all the conservatives in my life who did not make me feel even worse than I already did on election night. No one rubbed it in my... Some guy outside of Fox started chanting "lock her up" at me and asked if I was ever going to be on television again. So that wasn't great. But I think that
this is the thankful segment.
Fine, I take it back. Thank family and friends and kind colleagues.
Good for you.
Yep.
Charlie Hurt?
Yeah, no, definitely family and all that. But another thing that I am absolutely thankful for in a political sense is that we do have a government of separated branches where they are jealously guarding their turf. And I think the best chance of like an honest conversation, honest disagreement that we've seen in a long time. And that's a very, very positive thing.
Yes, I agree with that completely. Molly?
I'm actually thankful this week for a friend of mine who I'm celebrating her life. She was buried earlier this week, Barbara Pauling. She was a member of my congregation, and she just faithfully served her community for decades. And I think on Thanksgiving, it's a good reminder. Her work included so much reconciliation between people, and I think as we sit down and have dinner with people who we might not all agree with, it's a good model to think about being peacemakers in our community and learning to love our neighbors even if we have political differences.
If you came out of her funeral feeling inspired, that says a lot about her. That's pretty great. Well, I'm thankful for my neighborhood. I live in D.C., lived here a long time. No one on my block agrees with me. They're all wacko liberals. Every Prius on my street has an Obama sticker on it. They come that way from the factory, but they haven't scraped them off. And yet I like them all. And so it's this weird little biosphere where even though we hate each other's political views, every single person is nice. And when we're gone, they pick up my newspaper and my mail. And it's just a reminder that politics isn't everything. And I'm just really grateful to come home to that every night.
That is nice. That's powerful.
Not powerful, but...
No, it's a big
I'm not getting
deal.
funny. I actually always think that, no matter how crazy it is. I go back, and I think they all think that I'm secretly liberal because they like me, so they can't imagine I actually believe what I
I
believe.
felt that way since I met you.
We as a country are so much greater than our politics.
It's true.
And it's important to remember that.
It's totally right. That is a deep and true point. I hope we all remember that. Thank you all. You were excellent. Jessica, Molly, Charlie, that is about it for us on the special edition of Tucker Carlson Tonight. You can tune in every weeknight at 7 as we get back to the very basics. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your loved ones. Good night, and we will see you next week.